Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. Washington is taking on a multi-billion-dollar industry, prediction markets. Companies like Kalshi say it's not gambling, but a King County judge ruled last month that Kalshi has to cease most of its operations in Washington. Washington State Standard reporter Jake Goldstein-Street will tell us more about this legal battle in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. Seattle broke a record last month for downtown visitors. According to the Downtown Seattle Association, more than 3.7 million people visited in July. That's a 5% increase from last July and a 12% increase from 2019. World Cup matches this summer boosted visitors, according to the association, and their figures are based on cell phone location data, which doesn't count international visitors, so the actual number is likely even higher. NFL owners today will vote to officially sign off on the sale of the Seattle Seahawks. Last month, the estate of Paul Allen sold the team to an ownership group led by Vinod Khosla for $9.6 billion. He's a Silicon Valley tech investor and co-founder of Sun Microsystems. At least 24 team owners need to approve the deal for the sale to go through. Multiple news outlets have reported that the sale is expected to sail through. And get ready for another music festival in Seattle. The venue Baba Yaga has announced Baba Obscura, which will take place over 4 days in early November at multiple venues in Pioneer Square. The lineup includes Seattle's very own Naked Giants, the Black Tones, and Portland's Rose City Band. The Seattle Times reports the festival will carry on the psychedelic and garage rock spirit of Ballard's long-running Freakout Festival, which will not return this fall. Check back for more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now.
Download the Kalshi app today. It's legal in all 50 states, which are Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Georgia.
Prediction markets are everywhere, and even if you're not trading on events, you've probably heard of Kalshi. Celebrity spokespeople.
Well, there's a lot of infection in there, Timmy. You're doing really well. Are you feeling anything?
Countless TV and social media ads.
I trade on soccer and esports on Kalshi.
I trade daily temperatures primarily in Chicago and monthly tornado counts.
I trade on what interests me. Politics, mentions, anything.
And now, a high-profile legal case here in Washington state. A King County judge recently ordered Kalshi to stop a majority of its operations in Washington, saying it undermined the state's laws on online gambling. But Kalshi is fighting back, and a hearing next week may change how the state handles prediction markets. It's going to be hard to predict where this one goes, and for now, Washington residents can't bet on it. What you can bet on is that Jake Goldstein-Street is here to tell us more. He's a reporter from the Washington State Standard. Jake, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate it. So for those not in the know, what is Kalshi and what can you predict on their platform?
Sure. Well, just about anything, I would say. It's a New York City-based company. Considers itself a prediction market, which is a relatively new term. Gives users the opportunity to wager on just about anything. You can peruse their site today. You could bet on the state of the national economy, whether congressional salaries are going to increase, whether the Mariners are going to make the playoffs. I'm still holding out hope. It works by basically linking two customers on opposing sides of a wager. One who thinks, for example, the Mariners are going to win today, another who thinks they're going to lose, and Kalshi collects a transaction fee from both of them. Launched about 5 years ago, and like you said, it's become pretty ubiquitous. You watch any sporting event or just about anything on TV, you're bound to see an ad for Kalshi or Polymarket. It's valued already at $22 billion. Partnered with major news networks, sports leagues, teams just this week. That includes now 5 Major League Baseball teams. The Athletic, which is owned by the New York Times, is eyeing a sponsorship deal. The company says it handles upward of $10 billion in wagers per month. And a recent analysis found that wagering on prediction markets has surpassed that you see at physical sports books.
You know, Jake, let's help listeners understand a little bit more about what people are actually predicting on Kalshi.
Sure. I mean, like we said, it's just about anything. I mean, when you talk about the climate angle, you could bet on how much it's going to rain in a given month. In, for example, Seattle or Miami, you can bet on the high or low temperature. One area of concern related to that is this idea of betting on wildfires. There's a recent bill out of Congress from Representative Michael Baumgartner from Eastern Washington trying to ban this. That's been one area, leaves open this concern that there's going to be arson to try to win these wagers. I don't think there's been necessarily any evidence of that, but it's something that they're trying to nip in the bud.
Well, it sounds like sky's the limit in terms of what you can predict on the prediction market and put money on. Why has this become so ubiquitous now?
Sure, I think it goes back to just sports gambling more generally. I think before even Kalshi and Polymarket came on the scene, even just in the past few years, sports gambling was on the rise, and it's basically just filling that gap that a lot of states have where you can't do that, and giving a way to sort of get around state gambling laws, calling it a commodity trading system to be able to bet on those instead of needing to go, in Washington's case, to a tribal-run casino.
All right, there is a lot to unpack there, but let's start with how popular prediction markets are here in Washington state.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say exactly how much money is wagered here. I think it's popular everywhere, it seems. And there's a lot of concern, especially among the young male population that enjoys, especially sports betting. I would say that's the lion's share of Kalshi, Polymarkets, all these prediction markets business is on sports gambling, since that's not legal otherwise in Washington, unless you're at a tribal casino in person. And so this allows you basically, as it stands, to get around that.
Okay, big business, young men drawn to this prediction market. How is Washington State pushing back against Kalshi right now? Why step in now?
Sure. So back in December, the state's gambling commission issued guidance saying that offering these sorts of what they're called event-based contracts or participating in these prediction markets isn't authorized here. A few months later, the Attorney General, Nick Brown, sued Kalshi, likening the company to a bookie with a fancy name and accusing it of violating state gambling laws related to only allowing betting at tribal casinos on sports. And a King County judge recently agreed with Attorney General Nick Brown on this issue, ruling that Kalshi was ignoring that gambling commission guidance, likely violating state law. This led to an order from that judge here in King County, ordering Kalshi to implement a preliminary version of what's called geofencing, restricting it to Washington residents by August 19th, last week, and then a more complex version of that by September 2nd. And so that's the big deadline that we're going toward next week. This order has to block wagers on sports, politics, entertainment, culture, technology, science. You'd still be able to wager on things like commodities, climate, economics, and finance. These are sort of similar things that you could bet on the stock market in a different way. Kalshi says it started blocking Washington bettors based on that August 19th deadline. If the company doesn't meet that September 2nd deadline, which I think is now a little bit up in the air, it potentially faces $120,000 a day in penalties.
Which is really just a tiny fraction of what they're taking in.
Presumably, yeah.
All right, well, part of this judge's order is that Kalshi is banned from advertising to Washington consumers about wagers restricted under state law. Are we going to start seeing fewer Kalshi ads now?
It's hard to say, especially in national broadcasts, if that's going to hold here. Another thing that the state has been upset about is that Kalshi will advertise directly to Washingtonians, saying you can bet on the NFL, for example, even in Washington, which you otherwise couldn't. Those are the sorts of things that the state is hoping to avert.
Kalshi disagrees with this tactic. How are they fighting back against the judge's ruling?
Kalshi now says that Washington's being unfair in how they're handling this because they're still allowing these same types of wagers through a company called Crypto.com. The state's done the same with Robinhood, which also has one of these prediction markets, and trying to bring that before the judge's attention here in King County, telling him that this is unfair, that why are we being blocked, but other companies are still allowed to do this without any regulation, really. There's a hearing on that next week to decide that, the same day as they're supposed to have this final sort of geofencing in place to stop Washingtonians from being able to gamble on a variety of issues. It remains to be seen exactly, if we're going to get to that final version.
You mentioned Polymarket. Are other prediction markets also being barred?
I think Kalshi's kind of on the forefront of being held accountable here. It's between it and Polymarket. They're the two biggest on the market. Kalshi, I think, is the one that people are going after first, these states. Washington is not alone in this litigation. It's happening across many states. whether they're led by Democrats or Republicans. It's a bipartisan issue from that standpoint. New York is seeking tens of billions of dollars in damages. Arizona's even filed criminal charges. And then North Carolina also passed a tax on prediction markets. And the legal landscape has been mixed. This has not been where judges have uniformly been ruling against Kalshi, saying that states are right. And it basically comes down to, like so many issues, this idea of federal versus state authority. Kalshi says that it should be regulated by the feds. The states are trying to get in here saying we've got our own gambling laws, and this flouts them.
The Commodity Futures Trading Commission told Kalshi earlier this month to continue operating in New York despite the lawsuit there. Let's talk a little bit more about the federal government's role here.
Yeah, the Trump administration is backing these prediction market companies big time, threatening states that try to regulate them or hold them accountable. Michael Selig, chairman of that commission that you mentioned, he was appointed by President Trump. And before joining the commission, he was a lawyer for crypto and prediction market companies. And the commission has allowed Kalshi up to this point to operate with little regulation from the federal government in states like Washington, despite the laws here.
Okay. So are any legal actions from Washington state sort of waiting out the clock until the federal government steps in?
I think that's the end game here, is you're going to see either Congress or the Supreme Court step in at some point. I don't think that the federal government wants a patchwork of regulation across different states. Obviously, we have that with state gambling laws. Some states are much more lenient, allow you to bet through things like FanDuel or DraftKings on your phone, not at casinos. But I think that's where it's going to come down, is there needs to be some kind of concrete federal guidance. I think even Selig from the Commodity Futures Trading Commission agrees with that there needs to be something. Obviously, they're a bit more favorable to the prediction markets than, Washington.
Right now, you can bet online on tribal land. What are Washington tribes saying about Kalshi? Is this a threat to their business?
Yeah, I don't think they've been incredibly vocal, at least that I've seen, on this, but you have to assume it's a pretty existential threat, specifically that revenue. Profits from casinos go towards social services for tribal members, other sorts of things. This isn't just for, profits for a CEO.
What might it mean for consumers to have a competitor to Washington's current setup right now?
Yeah, I think that goes back to the point that this fuels the idea of gambling addiction. If it's super easy, you're going to do it more and more. If you need to go in person, a lot of people don't have these casinos super close to where they live. That makes it harder to do it.
So just that one step in between might prevent somebody from, gambling away the mortgage.
I think that's the hope.
Kalshi is returning to court in King County on September 2nd and try and convince the same judge that their service isn't illegal. You don't have to put any money on the line, but what are you predicting, Jake?
It's pretty rare for a judge to say, I've thought through this. This is how I've come down. Now you say this, I'm going to change how I feel. I think that's pretty rare. I would be pretty surprised if the judge reneged on what he's saying here about trying to block Kalshi in Washington, or at least most of it. So that would be pretty surprising. But what's happening in Washington is by no means the end game. There's going to be a lot more to come. There's literally news on the legal front every day. And this Washington case is going to go forward further beyond this. The Attorney General is seeking civil penalties, seeking to recover money lost by Washingtonians. I think we're going to learn more about how much Washington residents have wagered on this as that legal case develops. But that could take months or years.
And certainly a lot of sports teams and private industry have bet on Kalshi as well. Every day we seem to hear another one backing this product.
Yeah, clearly they see it as a way to buoy interest in their teams, even as sports gambling has been a pretty pernicious force for specifically athletes getting harassed online by people who lose wagers based on that. You have more and more athletes who are getting caught betting on sports, leads to either suspension, lifetime ban. This is something that was completely the boogeyman of sports, and now they're leaning into it more and more, where you're seeing, like you said, teams leaning into this specifically, even as they don't encourage it for their own players, or they, doesn't necessarily treat their own players very well.
Jake Goldstein-Street is a reporter for the Washington State Standard. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to Seattle Now. Take a minute to rate and review the show on your podcast app. Today's episode was produced by Vaughn Jones. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Andy Hurst, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. Talk to you tonight for Evening Headlines.